The docking clamps shuddered as the eviscerant accepted the shuttle like a predator tolerating a flea. Jace Marlowe felt the vibration through the soles of his boots, leaned back against the shuttle's bulkhead, and tried to decide whether his stomach's lurching was from excitement or recycled protein cubes. "Welcome aboard, human technician Marlowe," came the ship's automated voice, which sounded suspiciously like someone had programmed it with passive aggression. "Thanks," Jace muttered, adjusting the strap of his tool satchel. "Always wanted to work for a giant, heavily armed toaster." The airlock hissed open. Waiting on the other side were two Zyrenthi guards in armor that looked like it had been carved from volcanic glass and bad intentions. Jace had read the briefing on the species. Humanoid, yes. Tall, silver-skinned, long-eared, culturally wound tighter than a neutron spring. Warriors. Strategists. Not big on humor. He tried smiling anyway. Neither of the guards reacted, unless twitching slightly was their version of a hearty welcome. One of them stepped forward, voice metallic under his helmet. "Follow. Commander Thalos has ordered your integration." "Integra. What now?" They turned and walked off without answering. "Right. Good talk," Jace said, hustling after them. The corridors of the eviscerant were sleek, sterile, and subtly humming, like the ship itself was holding its breath. He caught glimpses of Zyrenthi crew members, elegant, austere, every one of them walking like they'd been sculpted with a level. No one looked at him. No one spoke. Jace suddenly became painfully aware of how human he looked. Shorter, rounder, hair a perpetual mess, and carrying a multi-spanner that had been held together with duct tape and hope since Mars Outpost Beta. They arrived at a lift and ascended 3 levels in eerie silence. Then the doors parted, and he stepped into what looked like a museum exhibit of doom. Weapons lining the walls, exo-armor racks looming like skeletal giants, and at the center, an open space where something large and badly damaged waited like a wounded animal. "Armor," one of the guards said, gesturing toward it. "High damage. Sacred. Commander's orders. Restore." Jace blinked. "That thing?" He approached it slowly. The armor was indeed massive, elegant, and absolutely wrecked. Plasma scoring along the pauldrons. A missing joint on the right leg. It looked like it had gone 3 rounds with a black hole and lost. "Looks like someone tried to kiss a singularity," he muttered, kneeling beside it. As he unpacked his tools, a thought tugged at him. Sacred. They'd said that. Sacred armor. He probably should have asked what that meant in Zyrenthi terms. But no one had given him a manual. And Jace had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to figure things out was to dive in head first and patch up the bruises later. He began humming as he worked, a human tune that had once gotten him banned from a Martian karaoke bar. The armor responded well to his touch, strange considering how advanced the alloy was. He swapped out a fused conduit for a human-compatible power loop, rerouted the neural sync mesh through a custom stabilizer he'd built from scrap hoverbike parts, and polished every scorched inch until it gleamed like an asteroid dipped in oil. He didn't notice when the guards left. He didn't notice how quiet the room had become. He was too focused. It wasn't just repair anymore. It was art. 2 hours later, he stood back and wiped sweat from his brow. "There," he said. "Good as new. Maybe better. You did not ask permission to alter the honor threading." The voice came from behind him, calm but sharp, like the edge of a blade sliding free of its sheath. Jace turned, tool still in hand. She stood in the doorway, like the embodiment of war given form. Tall, powerful, long silver hair pulled back in braids that shimmered like mercury. Her ears, long and tapered, framed a face that looked carved from porcelain and menace. Thalos. Commander Thalos. He gulped. There were thermal fractures in the threading line. I reinforced it with a hybrid coil from a Terran gravity harness. Cuts weight, improves response time." She stepped forward slowly, eyes never leaving his. "You touched every part." "Well, yeah. Kind of hard to repair something if I don't touch it." Her gaze dropped to the armor. She circled it once, then again, like a priest inspecting a relic. Then, without a word, she dropped to one knee. Jace froze. She set her fist to the floor, lowered her head, and then slowly pressed her forehead to the tip of his boot. A strangled noise escaped him. "Whoa, hey, what are you? This is..." Should I be bowing too? Is this a thing? Did I win a contest I didn't enter? She rose, but her head remained bowed. You have performed the rite of iron rebirth. Without guidance. Without error. The bond is sealed. I thought I was just fixing a dented shoulder plate. The armor is the warrior. You have restored me. Jace glanced around, hoping someone would jump out and yell, "Just kidding!" or at least hand him a drink. No such luck. The only witnesses were silent racks of weapons and an increasingly suspicious-looking plasma rifle. "Okay," he said slowly. "So, I restored you. Does that mean I get a thank you card, or is there more?" Thalos looked up, and something shifted behind her eyes. Not softness, not quite, but a certain gravity. "From this day forward, your name is bound to mine." Jace blinked. "Bound? Like friends? Like blood?" "Oh," he paused. "That's very flattering and terrifying. Flatterifying. You will dine at my table, walk at my side, speak in my name when I do not. I really just wanted to tune up a plasma vent and maybe take a nap." Her expression remained unchanged. "You may rest at my side." Jace sighed. "Of course, that's totally normal. Super casual. This happens all the time where I'm from. Fix someone's armor. Next thing you know, they're offering you shared housing and spiritual co-pilot status. You are overwhelmed." "Oh no, I'm great. I'm just processing. It's like downloading 3 years of social customs through a straw." She inclined her head. "I shall provide guidance." He stared at her, then down at the armor, then at his wrench. "This thing," he said, shaking it slightly, "has a chip in the handle and smells like engine grease, and apparently it just rewrote my life. Sacred tools often appear unimpressive." Jace laughed weakly. "Tell that to my old boss. He once duct-taped a quantum stabilizer to a broom handle and called it the equalizer." She didn't smile, but her ears twitched. Jace sighed again, looked at the repaired armor, and whispered, "I should have just been an accountant." Jace woke up to the unsettling sensation of being stared at by someone who could snap his spine with one hand and quote ancient poetry with the other. "I made toast," he said automatically, blinking blearily at Thales, who stood exactly 2 feet from his face, arms behind her back like a sergeant inspecting troops. "You were motionless for 6,000 heartbeats. I confirmed life signs before proceeding," she said, offering what looked like a breakfast tray and what smelled suspiciously like warm metal and citrus. "Appreciate the concern," Jace muttered, sitting up and immediately hitting his head on the overhanging shelf he hadn't noticed last night. "Ow, that's fine. That's good. Really adds to the ambiance. I have selected nutrition units calibrated to your species requirements. A Zorenthi Culinary A. I performed the analysis after reviewing 3 of your past meals, one of which appeared to be compressed bread surrounding oxidized meat." "Yeah, that's called a cheeseburger." "It is revered in your culture?" "Only if it comes with fries." She set the tray beside him on the narrow bunk. It held something that resembled an omelet if the omelet had been constructed by a team of engineers working with nanofiber paste in questionable intentions. He took a bite. It crackled. "Okay," he said after chewing. "That's either food or a minor energy source. I'll take it." Thalos inclined her head. "Your satisfaction honors me." Jace wasn't sure how many more times he could be honored before it caused a diplomatic incident. "About yesterday," he began, rubbing his temple. "The whole kneeling thing, the sacred armor, the soul bonding situation. You know, just minor stuff I feel like we should circle back to. You completed the rite of iron rebirth. It is irrevocable." Right, and I respect that. But also, I'm just a mechanic. I fix stuff. Sometimes I fix stuff I probably shouldn't. I once accidentally rebuilt a cargo drone into a smoothie dispenser. But what I'm saying is I didn't mean to, bond anyone to anyone." Thales regarded him for a long moment, then turned and opened the door to his quarters. "You must attend the Reverence Hall. I feel like I should be afraid of a place called that. It is where the bond is witnessed." "Of course it is." The walk through the ship's corridors was significantly more awkward than the day before. Every Zorenthi they passed bowed slightly to Jace. Not to Thales, to him. "I'm getting a lot of nods," he whispered. "They acknowledge your sacred station." Can I trade it in for a less sacred one with a chair and some coffee? She did not answer. The Reverend's hall was a circular chamber with soft glowing walls and a high ceiling that pulsed faintly, like the breath of a giant. At the center was a pedestal holding the armor Jace had repaired, now reassembled, polished, and looking far more intimidating than anything that had any right to be. A group of high-ranking officers stood around it in ceremonial garb that appeared to involve a lot of swirling silver and embedded plasma shards. Jace resisted the urge to hide behind Thalas. One of the officers stepped forward, an older Zerenthi, whose ears were longer than Thalas's, and whose expression suggested he'd seen at least 2 galactic wars and had been disappointed by both. "This is the human?" "Yes," Thalas said. "Jace Marlowe, Ironbinder." "Why does he smell of oil and citrus?" "That is his scent." "Ah," Jace raised a hand. "I showered, just throwing that out there." The old officer's eyes narrowed. "Has he been instructed?" I attempted to explain. He responded with jokes. Jace shrugged. "It's a coping mechanism. I use humor to hide crippling panic." The ceremony proceeded anyway. There was chanting. There was some kind of incense that made Jace sneeze 4 times, and possibly caused brief visions of his high school janitor. There was a moment where he was asked to place his hand on the armor's core and repeat a phrase in Zerenthi that sounded like someone gargling vowels while being electrocuted. "Did I just promise to clean your garage every week for the rest of my life?" he asked afterward. "You promised to uphold the honor of my line." "Great, so no pressure." Afterward, they walked silently through the halls again, Jace trailing half a step behind, trying to process everything. He had questions, many questions. Top among them, was he now legally married to a battle commander? Spiritually? Emotionally? Metaphysically? Before he could form any of them into coherent thoughts, a junior officer intercepted them. "There's an issue in Weapons Bay 6. Core link malfunction. Thermal feedback in the stabilizer loop." Jace blinked. "Finally, something I understand." He jogged off toward the bay, relieved to have something with screws and wires to deal with instead of interstellar marital status. The bay was in chaos, sparks flying, warning klaxons blaring, and 3 Zerenthi techs standing a good distance away from a venting core housing. "Tools," he said, holding out a hand. One of the techs hesitated. You are the bonded one." Yeah, I'm also the guy who's going to keep this place from exploding." "Wrench." "Please." They handed him the tools. He dove in, fingers moving with the confidence of someone who had once rerouted a fusion intake with a spoon and a prayer. The core hissed angrily, but stabilized under his touch. When it was done, he stood, slightly singed but triumphant. "There, stable, and I didn't even void any warranties." The tech stared at him like he'd just performed a miracle. "Does this mean I get an extra dessert ration?" "You may request anything," said one. Jace blinked. "Anything?" "Within reason." "Okay, I'd like a chair, a comfortable one, with lumbar support, possibly a footrest, and if there's a Zerenthi version of coffee, I'd like to meet it." The techs bowed. One ran off. Back in his quarters, Jace found Thalas waiting, standing next to a large, intricately crafted seat that looked more like a throne than a chair. Steam rose from a small cup on the armrest. "I heard of your feat," she said. "I had this constructed." Jace sat. It molded to him instantly, warm and supportive in all the right ways. He took a sip. The beverage punched him in the soul. "This," he said, coughing slightly, "is either coffee or the distilled essence of a black hole." "I love it." Thalas nodded solemnly. "You are adapting well. I'm surviving through sarcasm and caffeine." "Then you are a true warrior." He paused, then grinned. "Guess I better live up to the armor." The repair bay was quieter than usual, which in Jace's experience usually meant someone was about to break something extremely expensive. He had taken to hiding behind a half-disassembled grav drone and pretending to recalibrate its coil matrix whenever he needed a break from the sudden flood of reverence and high honor being thrown his way. Apparently, being bound to Commander Thalas elevated his status from some guy with a wrench to walking artifact of spiritual significance. "I fixed a shoulder plate," he whispered to the drone, which beeped in sympathy. "Not a galaxy, not the laws of physics, just a plate." Your drone is receiving unnecessary emotional energy, Thales said behind him, causing him to yelp and bang his knee on the drone's power shunt. It's called venting, he said, limping around the bench. Humans talk to things. Tools, coffee makers, occasionally malfunctioning toilets. It's cultural. Noted, she said, stepping closer. You are summoned to the interrogation theater. That's not a phrase that inspires joy. You are not the one being interrogated. That inspires slightly more joy. He followed her through the corridors, which had stopped feeling intimidating and now just felt overly formal, like someone had designed the ship based on a museum brochure. Zyrenthi passed them, nodding solemnly, and Jace returned each nod with a vague wave that he hoped was not insulting in any dialect. They entered the theater, which was, disappointingly, not a theater. No popcorn, no reclining seats. Just a large circular room with a transparent observation ring and a center chamber filled with shimmering containment fields. Inside the chamber stood a creature unlike any Jace had seen. Tall, iridescent skin, 8 limbs, and a voice that sounded like rusted violins played backward. He was caught transmitting to the Furkai cluster, said a Zyrenthi officer, tapping a crystalline control pad. Encrypted packets, biometric masking, sloppy work. Why am I here? Jace asked, inching toward the observation glass. Unless you think my bond gives me telepathic lie detection powers, in which case, I should tell you I once lost a game of poker to a parrot. Thales pointed to the lower console. He used your repair credentials to access restricted frequencies. This is a matter of your honor as much as ours. I knew I should have updated my password. Fix-It 123 wasn't exactly elite security. The interrogation began. Jace expected harsh lights and questions shouted across the void. What he got was Thales, sitting calmly, asking one question every 5 minutes in a tone that could have passed for bedtime storytelling. The alien squirmed, twisted, hissed, then finally confessed to working with the Outer Syndicate, a loosely organized alliance of mercenaries, smugglers, and people who thought proper fashion meant spikes and cloaks. The moment it was over, Thales stood. You will assist in tracing his signal path. You understand Terran encryption structures. This will be vital. Jace rubbed his eyes. Sure, because this week wasn't complicated enough already. First, I spiritually bond myself to a warrior queen, then someone uses my login to betray the ship, and now I get to play space detective. Thales looked at him curiously. Warrior queen? Don't worry about it. Earth slang. You wouldn't like the musical number that comes with it. The signal analysis took 3 hours, 6 cups of Zyrenthi caffeine equivalent, which Jace now suspected was brewed from ground-up neutron stars, and 1 incident involving a software anomaly that caused a maintenance droid to declare its love for a fusion welder. Jace pointed at the data scroll hovering in midair. There. That's the routing node, a relay buoy on the dark edge of Sector 10 Theta, cloaked, unregistered, and emitting in pulse burst intervals to avoid detection. Thales nodded. We will go there. Jace blinked. We? I require your skills in case the technology is Terran. You will accompany me. Do I get hazard pay? A helmet? Snacks? Your honor is your compensation. I was afraid you'd say that. The small recon vessel was called the Silent Fang, which Jace felt was misleading since its engine vibrated like a blender fighting a bag of nails. He strapped into the co-pilot seat while Thales set the trajectory with unnerving precision. Do you ever miss? He asked as they launched. I have missed once. Oh, when? She turned to him, solemn. It was during a poetry contest. I attempted humor. It was not well received. Jace grinned. So you've bombed at an open mic too. We really are bonded. They dropped into the dark edge of Sector 10 Theta an hour later, space folding and unfolding around them like a sleeping dragon's breath. The relay buoy appeared as a glint against a background of stars so dense, it felt like they were floating through spilled glitter. Thales piloted closer, cloaking the ship's signature. Jace ran a remote diagnostic. This thing's patched together from human and alien tech. Some of it's ours, some of it's Zarnathi, I think. And someone glued a subroutine called bloop.back to the signal router. That doesn't feel military. Can you shut it down? I can do better. I can reverse the pulse. Thales raised one eyebrow. A trap. A ping-pong match. We hit the ball back and see who grabs it. It took 30 minutes and more cursing than he'd like to admit, but when he hit the final key, the buoy emitted a soft trill and began sending out a beacon, one that could only be answered by its source. They waited. Minutes passed. Jace started to hum the theme song to a Forgotten Earth sitcom. Then a response. Got it, he whispered, triangulating. It's coming from, oh, that's not great. It's inside the spiral drift. Thalus's eyes narrowed. The spiral drift is unstable. No known map. Gravity fluctuations make pursuit dangerous. Great. So we just poke the space equivalent of a hornet's nest and pray it doesn't explode. She stood. Prepare. We enter at first light. There's light in space? Figure of speech. Didn't know you did those. I'm adapting. Jace looked at the map, the blinking marker, and the storm of gravitational eddies beyond it. Adapting, he muttered. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Right after I change my emergency underwear pack. The spiral drift made normal space look like a placid lake. This was not a compliment. Jace stared out the forward viewport of the Silent Fang and quietly wished for a different job. The drift rippled in colors space wasn't supposed to have, shifting hues that twisted around gravitational sinkholes like they were part of some interstellar lava lamp designed by a physics major on zero sleep. I think I'm motion sick from looking at that, he said, clutching a stabilizer bar. Is that even a real color? I think it just invented a new shade of whoops. Do not focus on the visual field, Thales said calmly from the pilot's seat. The drift responds to cognition. It reacts to perception. So if I imagine something weird, it gets worse? Yes. I should probably stop thinking about dancing hippos. That would be wise. Navigating through the drift was like threading a sewing needle during an earthquake. Thales adjusted the ship's course every 10 seconds, her fingers flicking across the controls with steady precision. Jace tried not to throw up or offer unhelpful suggestions. Still not too late to turn back and send a polite email to the enemy, he muttered. Something like, hey there, noticed you're violating intergalactic codes. Please stop. Thank you. Thales didn't look away from the console. You are humorous under stress. It's either that or scream. I prefer the humor. Good, because the screaming's not off the table. They crossed a gravity rift so sharp the ship's artificial dampeners gave a startled chirp and rebooted mid-course. Jace floated an inch off his seat for a moment before gravity reasserted itself with a slap. Okay, he gasped. That felt like being tackled by a black hole with anger issues. The source signal is near. I am detecting a structure. Jace blinked at the display. Sure enough, a station, roughly cylindrical, surrounded by static interference and spinning slowly against the drift currents, hovered in the void like a haunted soup can. That doesn't look like a military relay, he said. That looks like someone built a data farm out of leftover nightmares. It is concealed behind a frequency cloak. Stealth technology. Crude but effective. And of course we're going inside. Yes. They docked at a slow, cautious pace, bypassing the station's weak firewall and forcing the airlock open with a software override Jace built from a spare media player and a diagnostic cable. I used this same trick to jailbreak a vending unit once, he said as the airlock hissed open. Got unlimited root beer for a week. You are deeply resourceful. That's one way to say it. The other way is reckless with snack machines. Inside, the station was quiet. Too quiet. The halls were dimly lit by emergency strips that flickered now and then, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something that might have once been food. They moved through the corridors slowly, weapons at the ready. Thales wielded her pulse blade with casual confidence. Jace clutched a multi-tool modified to deliver a high-voltage shock and tried not to hyperventilate. The command room was half collapsed, the central console sparking, but the core unit still blinked with active data flow. Jace set to work immediately, kneeling beside the console and popping open a panel. Okay, looks like they piggybacked a data burst onto the quantum link here, kind of like hiding a message in someone else's pizza order. And, what? This encryption protocol, it's Xyrenthi, but like old, real old, pre-union formatting. Someone's digging up tech from the archives. This shouldn't even be active anymore. Thales narrowed her eyes. Show me. He pulled up a rotating glyph on the display. It shimmered, showing a chain of symbols. That's not a standard comm signature. That's a summons, a rally point. This station wasn't just transmitting data, it was recruiting. For the outer syndicate? Maybe. But this symbol here, see the overlapping crescents? That's from the old Zarenthi rebellion. Pre-peace accords. These people aren't just smugglers. They're exiles, hardliners. The Warborn sounds like a charming bunch. Extremists who refuse the unification treaty. They believe in isolation, conquest, and genetic supremacy. Wow, galactic racists, my favorite. A rumble echoed through the station, distant at first, then louder. Is that the ship destabilizing? Jace asked hopefully. Number that is a boarding vessel. Someone is coming. They ran. Back through the halls, down the corridor, ducking sparks and debris. At the docking bay, Thales turned. We cannot let them retrieve the core. Let me guess, you're going to blow it up. Yes. I was afraid of that. She handed him a detonator the size of a deck of cards. Trigger it once we are at safe distance. They sprinted back to the Silent Fang, launching from the station just as another ship, a sleek, angular vessel with syndicate markings, arrived on the far side. Jace punched the detonator. The station collapsed inward, a blue flash tearing through the drift like a ripple in time. The syndicate vessel was thrown off course, caught in the gravity recoil. Please tell me that didn't just tear a hole in the fabric of reality, he said, watching the view screen. If it did, Thales replied, we will repair it. With duct tape and a dream. Precisely. They settled back into their seats as the drift began to recede behind them. Jace stared at the stars slowly stabilizing around them. So, we just blew up a secret extremist base, made enemies of the Syndicate, and uncovered ancient Zarenthi war tech. Yes, typical Tuesday. For you, perhaps. I miss fixing vending machines. You would not be happy for long. Probably not. But at least root beer doesn't try to shoot me. Not yet. They both paused. You're joking, right? Mostly. The stars ahead looked calm. For now. The briefing room on the Zarenthi command ship felt warmer than Jace remembered, which was odd considering he was pretty sure the temperature was exactly the same. Maybe it was the fact that no one was glaring at him like he'd stolen the imperial crown. Or maybe it was because the last time he'd stood here, he hadn't accidentally uncovered a plot to restart an ancient war. Progress. Admiral Korath leaned forward over the holomap, hands clasped behind his back, in that way military types did when they were trying to look wise and not like they just learned everything from the ship's weekly drama report. You destroyed the transmission station, the Admiral said, intercepted the signal, disabled the buoy, and confirmed the identity of the exiled syndicate cell? Yup, blew it to bits. Sorry, gently disassembled it with controlled plasma detonation. My terminology is a little more toolbox than tactical, Jace replied. And you are certain they did not recover the encoded recruitment matrix? Very certain. I watched it go up in a blaze of very dramatic blue fire, which was not in the plan, by the way. We improvised. There was a moment where I thought space itself was going to fold into a pretzel, but Thales said that was mathematically unlikely. The Admiral turned to Thales. And you confirm his report? I do. He was instrumental, adaptive, cautious, occasionally inventive. Hey, Jace said, pointing. That's a compliment. In Zarenthi, that's basically a standing ovation, right? Thales didn't smile, but her ears twitched slightly, which he was starting to suspect was her version of a grin. Korath exhaled through his nose, which for him was probably a full chuckle. Then we are done here. You are to be commended, Mechanic Trace. Jace blinked. That's the first time anyone on this ship has called me that without either sighing or swearing. Things change, Thales said. They exited the chamber side by side. Jace rubbed the back of his neck. So what now? You go back to commanding warrior squads and slicing things with a glowing blade, and I go back to recalibrating coolant filters? You could, but... She stopped beside a viewport, watching stars scroll by in elegant procession. Your repairs were not only technical, you uncovered fractures beneath our alliance, healed something no one else saw was broken. I didn't even know what I was doing. That is the most dangerous kind of wisdom. That or extreme luck. You are not just a mechanic anymore. Jace gave her a sideways look. You mean spiritually bound, respected as holy symbol kind of not just? Or are we talking like slightly less expendable? Thalos turned. I mean this. You are offered a place in the diplomatic corps as liaison between Terran systems and the Zerenthi fleet. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Wait, me? Diplomat? Have you heard me talk? I once tried to ask for engine coolant and accidentally insulted a species' reproductive dance ritual. You've learned, she said. You adapt. You do not pretend to know more than you do. That is rare and valuable. And this has nothing to do with me fixing your armor that one time? She tilted her head. Only everything. I knew it. He stared out at the stars with her. The next few days were a blur. He was assigned quarters that didn't smell like solder and disappointment. The crew stopped saluting him awkwardly and started offering him actual greetings. One of the engineers even gave him a snack cube without having to be bribed. Progress. There were briefings, more briefings, a psych evaluation, which he passed by mostly telling the truth and leaving out the bit about naming his tools. Then his first mission. Not as a mechanic, not as someone who fixed things quietly in the background, but as a representative, someone who helped bridge the divide between two civilizations that barely spoke the same language, let alone shared a culture. He stood at the viewport again before departure, arms folded, trying not to look nervous. Thalos appeared beside him. You are prepared. I am a well-caffeinated bundle of nerves and charisma, but yeah, I think I'm ready. You should wear your new uniform. He looked down at the diplomat's jacket folded over the bench. Doesn't feel like me. It is you now. Do I get to keep the utility belt? She considered. Only if you do not use it to dismantle vending units. No promises. The transport ship lifted, humming with smooth, quiet energy. Jace stood near the main console, watching the stars blur as they entered jump space. A message chimed on his wristband, a recorded note. From Thalos. You are chaos wrapped in reason. The galaxy does not understand you. That is your strength. Wherever you go, make them laugh before you make them listen. He smiled. Weirdest job interview ever. But he was ready, not just because of the armor, not because of the honor, or the accolades, or even the wild ride through war zones and reality warping corridors. Because somewhere in the mess, he'd stopped just fixing things. He'd started connecting them. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't just another guy with a wrench. He was the bridge between worlds. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.